Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our consult call today. Today, we're going to be talking about how youth and young adult peer support partners work with parents and caregivers. This consult call is a part of the Mental Health Technology Transfer Network. We are in Region 10 that represents Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Alaska. And we're really pleased to have all of you here today. Of course, these calls are open to folks from all over the nation, but that is the region that we represent. The Mental Health Technology Transfer Network is about making sure that we have trainings that are accessible and free to all folks. So we disseminate and implement evidence-based practices for mental health disorders in our field. And our target workforce includes behavioral health and primary care providers, school and social service staff, and others who touch the lives of children who might be experiencing mental health challenges. Our goals as a part of the Mental Health Technology Transfer Network include accelerating the adoption and implementation of mental health evidence-based practices. We want to heighten awareness, knowledge, and skills of the workforce to address needs of individuals with serious mental health issues in our region and also across the nation, and foster alliances among culturally diverse practitioners, researchers, policymakers, family members, and youth. We just want to remind folks that you can go ahead and access all of our resources via the MHTTC website. We have all of our archived webinars, practice briefs, a calendar of upcoming events, and all of this is for free. And lastly, we want to remind folks that as a part of the MHTTC and just a part of the social work workforce, we want to use affirming language that is person-centered. We want to be culturally and linguistically responsive and make sure that all of our practices and language are inclusive and accepting of all peoples. So as a part of that, if we hear any sort of language that might be oppressive, we will call that out, and we encourage you to do the same to us as trainers, with the understanding that all of us are still learning, and that impact is often more important than intent. So some introductions. Unfortunately, my colleague Maria could not be here today, but that's her over there on the right with her dog Twinkie and her cat Clarence. And then that's a picture of me on the left with my dog Polo and my cat Jude. My name is Caitlin Baird, and I use she, her pronouns. I work at Portland State University as a trainer and consultant on various interventions that serve young people with mental health challenges. And prior to my work at PSU, I was a youth peer support specialist myself. So I bring my own lived experience to the work, and I'm really pleased to be able to use that experience to speak to some of the things that we'll be talking about today. Quick little plug for the Pathways Research and Training Center. You can access our website down there, where we also have a number of resources and a number of featured products that are free for you to use that we'll actually talk about some of those today that help support the work for those in the field working with youth and young adults. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll asking you just what your role is. If you don't see your role up there, please go ahead and drop it in the chat. Okay, it looks like most of us have shared our roles. Um, we have a youth peer support specialists, always good to see fellow youth peers. Hi, everybody. We have supervisors of youth peer support specialists, other peer support, and we have some clinicians. It looks like we also have a transition advocate. Awesome, welcome. A consultant for somebody developing a youth advisory board, a youth prevention services coordinator for the state of Maine. Awesome. And it looks like you oversee the youth peer support initiative as well. Admin at a private school, welcome. More youth peers, wraparound youth partner, and an ESA peer support. Awesome. And yeah, it looks like we've got some prevention specialists. Very cool. Well, thank you for joining, everybody. It looks like we have a really diverse group here today. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and drop everybody into breakout rooms. And I'd like you in your room to discuss what are some common challenges that youth peer support specialists face when they're working with parents or caregivers. So in your breakout room, please discuss this with your group and then identify somebody in your group who is going to share with the larger group when we all come back. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, great. You should receive an invitation to your room shortly.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Shane Falter. I'm a young adult peer mentor. Just having some audio trouble with my computer, so I just grabbed my phone and tried to join that way.
Oh, no worries. I will go ahead and add you to a breakout room
Yeah, I am in breakout room 2, I think, with Susan Small, Julie Maggers, and Madge Mosby.
with, yep. Okay, great. I'll make sure that you're in that room.
Thank you.
Welcome, Marcus. So right now we have folks in breakout rooms discussing the question that's on the slide here, but they have about 1 minute left. Yeah, and then everybody's going to come back and share some reflections from their discussion, but we'll have a larger group discussion too if you want to participate in that.
Good day, guys. I reached in late. Did anybody answer the question already?
So folks are just coming back now, and we're going to go ahead and have a larger group discussion. Yeah, all the rooms should close in about 30 seconds.
Sure thing.
Okay, it looks like we're all back. Who would like to go first and share some of the answers that you guys shared with each other in your rooms?
I can go if you'll have me.
Excellent. Yes, please.
Yeah. So yeah, for those of you that don't know, my name is Shane Falter. I was in Breakout Room 2 with some lovely other providers. And so I joined a little bit late. So I wasn't present when the question was given in its entirety. But from what I gather, it was just an opportunity to discuss, what, peer support specialists encounter or that are unique to their role. And so I was sharing with my breakout room that, a situation that I often find myself in is doing a little bit of a tightrope walk between maintaining alignment with the youth, but also trying to, be part of a team when there's like a family clinician or when the parents have differing goals than the youth does. That can be a tricky thing to navigate because, with the age group that we work with, or at least that I work with a lot, most of the youth are very independent minded. And, I like to encourage that. I think that's a good thing because that's what, therapy is all about, making mature and independent, decisions. So I don't want to squash that or, sort of give the youth I work with, a bad impression when I, meet with them. But it's still challenging because you want to have good rep around care, of course. You're not the only one on the case most of the time. And so, I usually try to translate whatever I hear during a family meeting or anything from the clinician or any other provider. I try to translate that into something that I think the youth would be receptive to. And I also try to go the other way too. So if I have any feedback from the youth that they're comfortable, with that me sharing with the rest of the team, I try to do that as well. So I do sometimes feel like I'm like a family clinician for family clinicians, sometimes when, there are a bunch of people on the case, but I don't know, that's what I shared. I don't know if any of that makes sense or if I need to explain myself better.
No, that makes total sense. And I totally relate. I know that oftentimes I would sort of describe my role when I was a youth peer support specialist as a bridge between the youth and other professionals, or helping them maybe see family perspective. And so when you said walking that tightrope, I think that that's a really, really good analogy for some of the common challenges that we face sometimes. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Does anybody else want to share some of the reflections that came up in their group?
Hello, my name is Grant Robinson. I'm from New York, and I am speaking for group number 1, Breakout Room 1. And we have come together and discussed several different barriers, but generally it's the discrepancies in the different types of services available to both youth and in particular the female population through fear of repercussions, whether it was CPS or child welfare or having custody being removed, and just the lack of services in general for both those populations. I can speak to it from my professional capacity. I've seen it time and time again, people ready for treatment, and then it comes up, hey, I don't want CPS to find out, or who's going to watch my kids. And generally, most of the treatment centers that I'm familiar with are primarily unisex. They're male dominated, and there's just usually not a lot of engagement when it comes to the female population, in my experience, and also for the youth. There's just a tremendous waiting list and a very limited number of providers that can actually care for that population.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that can be a huge challenge for not just providers, but also parents and caregivers when we have a real lack of services that are going to be culturally responsive to our young people, right? I mean, it can, especially when young people seem to be ready for treatment, but it's just not available and they get put on a waiting list. That's a huge challenge. Would anybody else like to share?
Yeah, I was also in Breakout Room 1. This is Cecilia Sorkin. And we also talked about, I know that we talked earlier, you're talking about walking this tightrope, but there's also a struggle around power and authority and credibility, right? And how do you equalize that when a youth peer support specialist is communicating with the parent or the caregiver, and the parent has a family support partner, the youth has a youth support partner, and now you're in a team trying to decide what the plan of care should be, what are the strengths, what are the needs, and there has to be a sharing of power where the youth peer support partner feels that they're on equal level with the parent and the family support partner. And that takes a real, that is a real paradigm shift to a lot of traditional dynamics.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the times, when we're on a team, collaboration is a lot easier said than done, right? And yeah, it's an interesting balance and definitely a shift in traditional dynamics of how services are provided, which can be a challenge. And we'll actually, at the end here, there's some resources that we have on how youth partners and family partners can work together to sort of achieve that balance a little bit. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Would anybody else like to share what came up in their groups? Okay, well, great discussion, everybody. So some of the common challenges we have listed here, in addition to the ones that we just discussed, are misconceptions about the role of the youth peer support specialist. This being a fairly new role to traditional services. A lot of the times people don't really understand the purpose of the role, what youth peer support specialists do, and what they don't do. So that can be really challenging when people are sort of making assumptions or think that the role is something that it's not. Also, as was mentioned, there are some worries about youth having more power in their mental health treatment plans, right? This is a shift in balance where youth partners are generally there to help young people really drive their treatment planning process. And a lot of the times, not only are youth not used to that, but parents and caregivers might not be used to that either. So that can certainly be a challenge that comes up. And then I've seen this happen in my line of work. There are concerns about the youth peer support specialist lived experience. When I was a supervisor of youth peer support specialists, I once had a parent call me and say that they didn't want one of my staff members working with their young person because they knew that they had lived experience with substance abuse and mental health disorders. And so I spoke with the parent, listened to their concerns, and they said that they would much prefer somebody like me work with their youth, which kind of made me giggle inside. And I said, well, I might be this person's supervisor, but I'm also a youth peer support specialist and also have lived experience with some of these challenges. So sometimes I think people have those concerns, and a part of our role really becomes breaking stigma around some of these around some mental health things, as well as other disorders or other experiences that folks may have. So some common misconceptions about youth peer support specialists. One is that we're there to tell youth what to do, right? I think sometimes folks look at youth peer support specialists as like an extra person to look after the youth. And I've definitely had professionals and parents tell me, can you make sure that the youth does this in their meeting? Or can you make sure that the youth does this? And really that's not the role of the youth peer support specialist, right? It's for us to help the young person decide what it is that they want to do and how are we going to help them promote that in a safe and healthy way. Another common misconception is that we are there to police young people. I have definitely been asked to sort of like tattle on young people or make sure that they're behaving in meetings, and like that's really not the role, right? It's not our job to police them or be an extra parent. It's our job to help young people sort of think through consequences. We do that through maybe sharing our lived experience with them, but really helping them build self-determination skills and deciding what decisions do they want to make and how do they want to act in certain ways. Yeah, we're not there to police them in sort of any way. And then some more mild ones. We're not expected to just like be their driver or be the assistant to the team. A lot of the times this is something that youth peer supports will be asked to do, and it ends up being counterproductive in the end, because then the young person, once we're not working together anymore, might not have a mode of transportation, right? So really it's our role to help them figure out how are they going to get from point A to point B if they don't have independent transportation themselves or their parent is unable to do it. But it's not okay to expect that the youth peer can just drive them everywhere. Now, of course, youth peers often do drive their young people, right? I would usually drive my youth to meetings. It was a great way to check in beforehand to see if there was anything that they needed, or to check in afterwards. But I did definitely have some young people who would want me, you know, to like come pick them up from school to go and drop them at their friend's house. And so it's important to sort of set those boundaries, decide what's appropriate and what isn't for you. We also aren't expected to be their babysitter. Obviously, if it were hanging out with a young person and it just happens to be, you know, during a time that their parent isn't around and it would be helpful for us to be seeing them anyway, that's totally fine. But we can't be expected to just show up and supervise as needed. That again is a real blur to the role, because we're supposed to be there to help the youth gain independence, and we don't want to be put in something that's compromising where we're going to have to tell them what to do, right? Are there any other common misconceptions that folks feel like they've faced? All right. Well, we have some tips here too for working with parents and caregivers. So number one, explain your role from the start. It's helpful to bring some sort of a tool that explains your role or to have an elevator speech prepared. Also, think about how you're explaining your role to parents and caregivers versus to young people, right? You also want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're clarifying confidentiality. So explain that you're not going to be sharing everything that you and the youth talk about, be upfront with that from the start, but you are a mandatory reporter. So obviously if there are safety concerns, that will be shared. I find that that often puts parents at ease. You know, we're not going to be like reporting back to the parent necessarily on what it is that we're working on with the youth, but we're certainly not going to be keeping any secrets that are going to be compromising the young person's safety. And then engage. It's totally okay to have a working relationship with parents, just maintain boundaries. I have spoken with youth peer supports before who were under the impression that, you know, they couldn't talk to the parent and things like that. And I just think that's sort of silly. We're all working together, right? So it's totally okay to say hi to the parent when you're going and picking up the young person or whatever it might be. You just want to make sure that you're really setting up those boundaries so that the parent understands you are still there to work with the young person. You're not necessarily there to work with the parent. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and have you all look at some scenarios and discuss them in your breakout rooms. So scenario number one, you are working with a youth who enjoys reading manga, and you two check out some manga books at the local library. When you drop the youth off at home, her foster parent tells you that she's not allowed to read manga and that you should not have let her check the books out at the library. How would you address this situation? So think about that for a second. I'm going to go ahead and put you in your breakout rooms, and then we will come back and discuss with the larger group. Welcome, Veronica. We have folks in waiting rooms discussing the current scenario that you see on your screen, but their waiting rooms will close in about 1 minute, and then we're going to discuss with the larger group.
Hello, and thank you for that. You ladies doing okay today?
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
gentlemen? Great.
Okay, it looks like most of us are coming on back. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Who would like to share some of the things that came up when you were discussing the scenario in your rooms?
I'll share.
Alice, yeah, go ahead.
I was in group 5, and one of the things that we talked about was hindsight 2020 is to maybe beforehand and for future reference, before any visits to the library happen, to talk about what types of books were acceptable to bring back to the home and what weren't and why. And then we also talked about, because at this point, the manga books are at the home, the foster parent doesn't want them there, the young person does want them. And it would be a great opportunity for conversation that could have many teaching moments in it, where the foster parent is able to say, you know, this is why I don't want these books, or this is why I don't like them. And there may be misconceptions that all of them are violent or all of them are bad, when indeed they may not be. And then the youth would have an opportunity to share what it is that they like about the books and what they get from them. And it just could end up being a really great conversation, or, you know, future conversations about what is allowed and not and why.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is actually sort of an opportunity to open up some effective communication, right? And maybe an opportunity both for the parent and the youth to sort of think about, like, what are some shared values here for the books, or like what are the reasons that the books are not allowed, things like that. That's an excellent answer, Alice. Would anybody else like to share?
I would. This is Norma, and I think we were in group 3. Some of the things that we came up with, or our discussion, kind of fell along the same lines as Alice, where it was about educating the foster parent, and those teaching moments. And one of the other things that came to mind was during those conversations is also learning how to compromise if there's a possibility of compromising. One of the things that was also discussed was one of the reasons that, well, I guess it was, the youth learning about themselves, connecting with peers, and there's just so much more that maybe they haven't opened up those communication lines with the foster parent. And this is a great time for us to help facilitate those opening those lines of communication. And what was the other thing? Yeah, I think just wanted to say that along the lines of what Alice was saying: educating, teaching moments, compromising, values and culture, and the parent maybe understanding a little bit more about the youth's culture. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you bring up culture there, Norma. So like they can really understand, like, how can they be more culturally responsive to the young person that they are living with, right? I think additionally, this is a good opportunity, to see if the youth, like, if they knew that manga wasn't allowed, then in the future, how will we help them sort of explore how they might communicate with the foster parent if the foster parent is telling them that they can't read manga, you know? So yeah, again, what does that compromise look like? How are we exploring exploring consequences, but without policing the young person? Does anybody else want to share?
Hi, I'm
Just to
Ashley
add-
from.
Sorry.
Oh, let's go with Ashley, and then I don't know who's speaking next, but Marcus, we'll have you go after, okay? So Ashley, take it away.
We have some of the same things come up in our group. There's definitely about the compromise, and also like in situations where maybe feelings get escalated, to try and help de-escalate the situation and get it to where both parties are listening to one another, and using like their I statement so that they can actually hear what the other person's saying. We also, it was mentioned that like fun looks different for each person, and how important maybe them seeking entertainment that they really value and their hobbies can help with their recovery process. And then to dig deeper into why the family member is objecting to that form of media. And going back to what was said earlier, maybe they have some misconceptions about that, and they don't realize that there's a lot of variety just within that type of media. And then the other thing we were talking about was cultural bias, and how for some people they've heard, they associate certain types of media with like witchcraft or things that are really negative in relation to their culture. And the young adult or youth might be looking at it from a totally different lens and perspective. And they're seeing like the morals in it and different things where maybe they're not getting a negative feel from that material. And so the two just have totally different viewpoints that they need to kind of meet each other halfway on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And really coming back to that learning about each other, being culturally responsive, where do we want to compromise, and how do we effectively communicate with one another on that? Thank you, Ashley. All right, Marcus, you're next.
It is good, guys. So just to add to what Norma and Ashley stated, one of the things we need to do is educate the parents, the foster parents, based on the values and the entertainment kids teenagers will interact with, or they will look into. Because, for example, if you don't educate parents about, same with the parents will have expectation of each other, and they will have certain views of manga, might interpret it as something against their religious beliefs, stuff like that. You have to also educate the kids about the understanding, the beliefs of the parents or the foster parents, because I mean, if it's the foster parents, most likely you have to learn over the values of the other party, and to kind of have and that will help alleviate any sort of triangulation, I would say, any sort of misinterpretation. So at least both parties will be in line with what the expectation and the values or that they have, and also educate the foster parents about understanding that manga. I mean, males more connected with manga, I would say. No offense to anybody here, but like myself, I'm adult, but I'm aware of a manga. So you have to basically, when you educate yourself about something, you'll be more informed, and therefore you understand that this is a simple entertainment for kids. It's just like cartoons for adults. So to me, you could ask a question to the foster parents. So how do you, when you were growing up, what are some things you enjoy when you're growing up? And if they talk about cartoons, something like that, then you can understand. You can be able to relate the manga, or the manga is what cartoons was to them, or whatever activities that they did when they were younger, and they will understand. Okay, they could kind of do a comparison to what manga is to the kids. So therefore, kind of bring it into one, so that everybody, the understanding is clear, and everybody will, I think that will alleviate any sort of conflict. But however, they will still have, sometimes they might have some parents who might be resistant to change, because other persons are not open to change, and that's the next step. So sometimes if persons are not open to change, there's also be some sort of conflict right there. So if that but I mean, there's always different ways to find some sort of resolve, and that would be based on the clinician.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Marcus. Again, an opportunity for the foster parent to become educated. And I love what you said about having them reflect on like what were some of the things that they were interested when they were younger, and where might the interest lie in manga for the young person. I think anytime that we can get folks to sort of reflect and relate, that's really helpful. All right, Julie, you're up.
Hi, everyone. This is such a rich conversation, and I appreciate it so much. I think that both representing in part what our group talked about, but then also reflecting on what the comments were just now, is that I think a challenge in family peer support and youth peer support. So everybody, I'm not a youth peer support provider. I'm a family partner. I think the trick is remembering that we're suspending whether we have an opinion or an agreement on the actual topic of the conflict, and not trying to convince anybody one way or another that manga is okay or manga is not okay. Rather, seeing this as an opportunity. Manga is just whatever the latest conflict is, right? Or the latest volatile point topic. And so really seeing this as the opportunity to help support a process of skill development around this communication, taking the perspective or seeing and hearing the perspective of the other. And this goes in both directions. And then, just helping the young person in a foster situation may have been very disempowered and may not have chosen this particular home, or all of the disempowerment that can happen for a youth who is living with a family other than the one that they were previously living with. So I think it's just being clear that whatever life experience comes up, that's the opportunity for us to work on problem solving, flexibility, compromise, hearing each other, all of those skills that are inherent to the work that we do, both with the young person and the family. And then having the family partner and the youth partner work well together and are able to have that conversation and those communication skills as well. Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Julie. And I think that's a really good point, is that as our role as peer support partners, really we're neutral, but there to help the family and the youth build self-determination skills and communicating with each other, right? And it's not, we want to make sure that our personal opinion isn't really coming into that, whatever the conflict or the conversation might be. So we have about 3 minutes left. Before we wrap up, I do just want to introduce the 2 other scenarios that maybe you can all chew on as you go on with your day later today. So one is you are a youth peer support specialist who works at a youth drop-in center, and one afternoon a parent shows up and is looking for their child. You explain that the youth is not there and they insist on waiting in the center. This is clearly making the other youth uncomfortable. How would you address this situation? So something to think about there. How would you work with that parent? And then another scenario, a mother of a youth that you are working with calls you frequently to complain about the youth's behavior. They also often request that you share what you and the youth discuss during your one-on-one meetings. How might you address this situation? Lastly, before we wrap up, if you visit our Pathways website, you will find these resources. I will also send them in a follow-up email. One is a tool that explains what a youth peer support does and does not do. When we were talking about misconceptions earlier, those were pulled from this tool. And the other is a peer practice brief on how youth partners and family partners can collaborate with one another. And so this is really helpful, I think, not just on how to collaborate with family partners, but also maybe some scenarios where you can think about how you are collaborating and working with parents and caregivers. Before we wrap up, are there any final questions? All right. Well, you will receive a evaluation session and a follow-up email from me today. Please go ahead and fill that out. It really helps us learn more about what we can change and do differently, what is working well, and what other topics can be provided. And of course, you can always visit us online at our website to sign up for our newsletter, email us or follow us on social media. And again, all of the trainings that we have via our website are free for you to access. We have archived webinars and all sorts of resources. So please feel free to browse those at your leisure. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. Have a great day, everyone. And I hope to see you next month.
Thank you.